I used to be a runner. That's how this all started. Back before the surgeries, before the stairs, and way before the HOA. Karen decided I didn't belong in her perfect little neighborhood. 3 years ago, I was in a car accident. A drunk driver swerved into my lane at 70 miles per hour. I don't remember the impact. Just waking up in the hospital with my mother sobbing beside me. She couldn't find the words, but the truth hit harder than any wreck ever could. My left leg was gone, above the knee. I was 28, a physical therapist, and I'd just run a half marathon 2 weeks before. Suddenly I couldn't walk, let alone work. I spent months relearning how to do basic things. How to balance, how to bathe, how to fall and get back up again. And worst of all, how to accept what I saw in the mirror. But I didn't give up. I couldn't. I had people counting on me, especially my younger sister, Lily. She's on the autism spectrum and doesn't do well with change. After the accident, she stopped speaking for almost 2 months. It was like my trauma had broken, her too. So every day, when I wanted to lie in bed and disappear, I got up instead. I got fitted for a prosthetic. I pushed through physical therapy. I smiled even when it hurt. And little by little, she came back. We both did. We eventually moved to a quieter neighborhood. A small gated community my mom thought would be peaceful and safe. I wish I could say she was right. From the outside, it was the kind of place that looked like a dream. Manicured lawns, little American flags and flower beds, kids riding bikes in packs. But it didn't take long to notice the undercurrent, the whispers when someone didn't fit the aesthetic, the smug smiles at HOA meetings, the constant passive-aggressive emails about trash cans being left out or non-compliant paint colors. Still, I kept to myself. I had enough going on just trying to rebuild my life. At first, I thought Karen was just a nosy neighbor. One of those people who always watches from her window like she's auditioning for a security camera commercial. She introduced herself in a syrupy voice that made my skin crawl, but I smiled and played nice. Because that's what you do when you're new and just want to fit in. But it didn't take long before she started making little comments. Do you have to wear shorts outside? Is that your real leg, or one of those bionic things? My grandson got scared when he saw you walking. He thought you were a robot. At first, I laughed it off. I've heard worse. People can be ignorant, and I've learned not to take it personally. But the way she said it, with that tight smile and eyes scanning me like I was a stain on her clean white porch, it was different. It wasn't just ignorance. It was cruelty. I told myself to ignore it. I tried to stay invisible. I even avoided the community pool because I didn't want to deal with the stares when I took my prosthetic off to swim. But I'm human. I wanted to live. So one afternoon, when the sun was finally warm after a brutal winter, I went out for a short walk with Lily. I was wearing shorts. My prosthetic was visible. And for once, I felt proud. Because I wasn't hiding anymore. That's when Karen stormed out of her house like I just burned her lawn. You need to cover that up, she hissed, pointing at my leg like it was some kind of weapon. This is a family neighborhood. I blinked. Excuse me? You heard me. It's disturbing. Children play here. You can't just walk around with that thing exposed. It's a safety hazard. A safety hazard. She said it like my existence was dangerous. Like the carbon fiber and steel I used to stand and move and live were somehow going to hurt someone's precious roses. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat locked up. Lily was clinging to my side, her eyes wide and anxious. Any confrontation throws her into a tailspin, and I could already see her fingers twitching. Her sign that she was on the verge of shutting down. So I turned around and walked home, tears stinging my eyes, shame burning hot in my chest, not because I believed her, but because I almost did. That night, I sat on my bed, staring at my leg. I remembered what it took to earn that prosthetic. How many hours I cried, bled, and screamed just to take a single step again. And now some entitled woman was trying to make me feel like I should be ashamed of surviving? No. No more hiding. No more staying quiet. If Karen thought she could bully me out of this neighborhood, if the HOA thought they could turn a blind eye to discrimination because it made them uncomfortable, then they didn't know who they were dealing with. I may have lost my leg, but I never lost my fight. It would have been easier to move away, to just pack our things, leave that tight-lipped community behind, and find a place where no one stared at me like I didn't belong. But moving meant starting over again. And I was tired. Tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of letting people like Karen win. So I stayed. But I didn't stay quiet. The very next day, I wrote a formal letter to the HOA board. I kept it respectful but firm. I explained that I was a disabled resident, and what Karen had said wasn't just hurtful, it was discriminatory. I reminded them that the Fair Housing Act protects people with disabilities from exactly this kind of harassment. I asked for a written acknowledgement and some accountability. I thought that would be enough. I thought surely someone on the board would step up and say, "This isn't okay." Instead, I got a notice in my mailbox 3 days later. A violation report. For public display of medical equipment. I laughed when I first read it. I thought it was some kind of joke. But the HOA wasn't joking. They said my prosthetic leg fell under the category of visibly disruptive objects that could cause distress to neighbors and children, and I wasn't to walk in common areas with it visible. How do you even respond to something that absurd? My prosthetic isn't a lawn flamingo or a rusted car part. It's my leg. It's part of me. I wear it so I can function, so I can live, so I can walk my sister to the bus stop, so I can take groceries from the car, so I can exist with a shred of normalcy. I brought the letter straight to the next HOA meeting. I was shaking the whole time, not from fear, but from fury. I walked in early, took a seat near the front, and waited as the board members trickled in, acting like they hadn't just tried to write me out of their perfect little community. And then Karen walked in, wearing pearls, a smug grin, and that same fake sweetness she used to greet people she secretly hated. When the meeting opened for resident concerns, I stood up. "My name is Ava," I said. "I live on Hawthorne Lane, and I'm here to talk about the violation notice I received, because of my prosthetic leg." A few heads turned. Someone even gasped quietly. I held up the letter. "This says my prosthetic is a public disturbance, that it might scare children. I want to be very clear. This is not a medical device I can tuck into a drawer. This is my leg, and I will not be told to hide it like it's something shameful." Karen rolled her eyes and muttered something under her breath. I caught her words. Dramatic. I turned to her. "You called my leg a safety hazard. You humiliated me in front of my sister, and now you've tried to weaponize the HOA against me." Karen shrugged. "It's not personal. We just have standards." "No," I said, my voice shaking. "You have prejudice, and you're using rules as an excuse to push people, like me, out." The room fell silent, and then, slowly, a hand went up in the back. It was Mr. Hanley, an older man who'd lived in the neighborhood for over 20 years. He stood with effort, leaned on a cane, and said, "I had polio when I was a boy. I wear a leg brace. Should I start hiding that too?" Someone else stood, Miss Tran, who used a walker. "My grandson asks questions about my walker all the time. That's how he learns. Are we scaring him, Karen?" Voices began murmuring. The board looked uncomfortable. Karen's smile faltered. It was the first time I realized I wasn't alone. But the meeting ended with no resolution. The board promised to review the language in the community guidelines, but I knew what that meant. They were trying to stall, hoping I'd quiet down or go away, so I did the thing Karen feared most. I made the story public. I posted a video online. Just me, sitting in my living room, telling the truth. No drama, no fancy production. Just my voice, my face, and the leg I refused to hide. I spoke about the accident, the recovery, the cruel comments, and the violation letter that broke something in me. I didn't expect it to go viral, but it did. Thousands of people began sharing it. Comments flooded in from others with disabilities who'd faced similar discrimination. Parents posted about how they showed their kids the video to teach them about courage and inclusion. News outlets picked it up. A disability rights group even reached out to offer legal support. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, the HOA got quiet. Very quiet. Because now, They were under scrutiny. I wasn't just a resident with a disruptive appearance. I was a face on the news, a person with a story. And people were listening. Karen didn't like that. Not one bit. She started posting passive-aggressive rants on the community Facebook group. "This neighborhood is being turned into a circus," she wrote. "It used to be such a peaceful place. Now we're in the middle of a media frenzy because someone couldn't keep their personal issues private." But by then, people weren't siding with her anymore. Even the board began to shift, quietly, nervously. They sent me a revised letter retracting the violation. They promised a full policy review. And most importantly, they backed off, because I wasn't backing down. Not anymore. If this part of the story hit you hard, if you believe people with disabilities deserve respect and dignity, please subscribe to the channel. These real stories deserve to be heard, and every subscriber helps us shine a brighter light on injustice. You'd think after going viral, after national attention and legal groups offering support, things would have cooled down. They didn't. Karen wasn't finished. In fact, after the video blew up, it felt like she doubled down, like she was embarrassed. The world saw her for who she truly was, and now she needed some way to claw back control, to remind everyone that she ran this neighborhood. And so, her next target was the community pool. It was late spring when it happened. I remember the exact day because it was the first time in a long time that Lily had agreed to go swimming with me. She's sensitive to crowds and loud noises, but that afternoon the pool was calm. For once, it felt like we might have something resembling a normal moment, something we both desperately needed. I always remove my prosthetic before I get in. The water. It's not waterproof, and walking on the pool deck is hard enough with one leg. I've learned to make it work. I keep a towel nearby, I stay close to the edge, and I'm always hyper-aware of my surroundings. The last thing I'd ever want is to inconvenience someone else. But apparently, Karen doesn't believe in grace for people who look different. We were in the shallow end, Lily floating with a pool noodle and smiling. An actual smile, the kind I hadn't seen in weeks, when I noticed Karen standing near the entrance gate with her arms crossed, watching, judging. I tried to ignore her. But a few minutes later, the lifeguard, a teenage boy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, walked over, visibly nervous. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, avoiding eye contact. I've been asked to let you know that the HOA has concerns about sanitary compliance and your prosthetic equipment." I stared at him. "I'm not wearing the prosthetic in the pool, right? But they said it still, raises health concerns. That people might feel uncomfortable. People. Let's be honest. He meant Karen." I looked over and saw her pretending not to watch us chatting loudly with another woman while throwing glances in my direction. I was stunned silent for a moment. Then I said, "Is there a written policy about this?" He stammered. "No, ma'am. Not that I know of." "Then I'm not leaving." He nodded quickly and backed away like he wanted to disappear. I don't blame him. He was just a kid caught in the middle of something ugly, but the damage was done. Lily was already climbing out of the water, panic in her eyes. "Are we in trouble?" she whispered. I shook my head. "No, sweetheart. We're okay." But we weren't okay, because now the one safe, calming place in the neighborhood, the pool, had been turned into another battleground. That night, I got an email from the HOA board. It was full of vague language about sanitation concerns, and community standards, and resident feedback. They strongly encouraged me to limit my use of shared facilities, to ensure maximum comfort for all members. They never named me directly, but I knew. I called my lawyer the next morning. The disability rights organization that had reached out after my video had already connected me with someone. I forwarded them every document, every email. I explained the history, how it started with comments, then escalated to official notices, and now this. What they told me made my stomach turn. What the HOA was doing wasn't just petty, it was illegal. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, and the Fair Housing Act, public and shared facilities, including HOA-managed pools, must make reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities. Trying to shame me or restrict access because of my prosthetic wasn't just cruel, It was a violation of federal law. We drafted a formal cease and desist letter and sent it to the board. I didn't want to sue. I didn't want more drama. But I wasn't going to let Karen and the cowards backing her take one more piece of my life away. Meanwhile, the neighborhood had begun to fracture. Some neighbors were supportive. They came by with kind words, little notes, even cookies. One woman, a mom of 2 boys, told me she used my story as a way to teach her sons about empathy. Others stayed silent. I saw the curtains twitch when I walked by. People who used to smile now pretended they didn't see me. But I held my head higher. I had a right to be there. Then, something unexpected happened. A letter showed up. Anonymous. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was a single sentence. You think you're special just because you're broken. But broken things don't belong in perfect places. There was no signature, but I didn't need one. I knew it was her. Karen was getting desperate, because no matter what she did, I wasn't going away, and for the first time she was starting to realize that this battle isn't just about one woman and her prejudice. It's about how communities treat people who look different, how they react when comfort is challenged by reality, and how far they'll go to protect appearances over humanity. There's a strange kind of loneliness that comes with being seen only when you're hurting. I never wanted attention, not from strangers, not from news outlets, not from people scrolling on their phones for a dose of outrage, but after that anonymous letter, after reading those words, broken things don't belong in perfect places, something inside me snapped. Not from pain, from resolve. I was done trying to convince the HOA of my humanity. I was done hoping Karen would wake up one day and see me as more than a problem to eliminate. I had spent years shrinking myself to fit into spaces that were never built for people like me, and I wasn't doing it anymore. So I told the world everything, not just the violation letter about my prosthetic, not just the attempt to bar me from the pool. I told them about the stares, the whispers, the slow erosion of dignity that people like Karen disguise as concerns for the community. I recorded a new video. This one was different. I didn't sit on my couch this time. I stood in front of the HOA sign, prosthetic leg fully visible, with Lily by my side. She held my hand the whole time, eyes fierce and protective. She's younger than me, but in that moment she looked like a warrior. My name is Ava, I began. I live in a neighborhood where being disabled is treated like a violation, where a woman named Karen has tried again and again to humiliate me out of existence. But I'm not leaving, and I'm not staying quiet. The video exploded. Within 48 hours, it had 1 million views. Celebrities retweeted it. Disability advocates called it a defining moment for accessibility awareness. A local news station reached out for an interview, then a national one, then 3. And suddenly, Karen wasn't the one controlling the narrative anymore. I was. The HOA panicked. I could feel it in every email they sent, full of clarifications and context and misunderstood intentions. But it was too late. The truth had a pulse now. One morning, I opened my front door and found something I didn't expect. Flowers. Dozens of bouquets lining the walkway. Cards tucked between stems. Notes from people I didn't know. You gave my daughter courage to wear her leg brace to school. I was afraid to speak out after my HOA tried to ban my service dog. Not anymore. You made me feel seen. It was overwhelming. Beautiful. Bittersweet. I cried. Lily cried. We sat on the steps and just breathed for the first time in weeks. But even as the outside world rallied behind us, inside the neighborhood, Karen was seething. She couldn't stop the tide, so she tried to poison the well. She started telling anyone who'd listen that I was milking sympathy, that I was staging a media circus, that I was just doing this for attention. She even tried to twist my story into one about her victimhood. I've been harassed, she wrote on the community Facebook page. I've been threatened, doxxed, called names, and all I ever wanted was to uphold the rules. That post got over 200 comments. Most of them weren't what she expected. Rules don't excuse cruelty. You targeted a disabled woman and got called out. Deal with it. Karen, this isn't about you. For the first time, she didn't win the argument. But she wasn't done. A few days later, I was walking Lily home from school when I saw Karen standing at the edge of her lawn, holding a clipboard. She stopped us. "I hope you're proud of yourself," she snapped. "You've ruined the peace in this neighborhood." I stared at her. "I didn't ruin anything. You just finally got called out." "You're making everyone uncomfortable." "No, I'm making you uncomfortable. There's a difference." She glared at my prosthetic, then at me. "This was a quiet, respectable place before you came." I stepped forward. "You mean before someone like me came? Someone you couldn't intimidate into hiding? Someone who dared to exist out loud?" Karen's jaw clenched. I wasn't afraid anymore. That night, I submitted a formal request for an emergency HOA meeting. With the legal support of the disability rights organization behind me, I asked for a full review of the HOA's treatment of disabled residents and a permanent change to the policies that had allowed this to happen. To my surprise, they agreed. Maybe it was the threat of legal action. Maybe it was the media pressure. Maybe, just maybe, it was finally the right thing to do. At the meeting, I brought every letter, every email, every shred of documentation. But more importantly, I brought stories. I read anonymous accounts from others in the neighborhood who'd faced quiet discrimination. A man with Parkinson's who was warned not to scare children with his tremors. A teenager with Tourette's who stopped using the community gym because someone said he made people nervous. I made sure no one could look away, and when I finished, the room was silent, even Karen. Especially Karen. That night, the board agreed to implement a disability inclusion policy. They created a new resident advocacy committee. They promised transparency, training, and, most importantly, accountability. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't erase what happened. But it was a start. A real one. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel since before the accident. Hope. There's a quiet power in survival, not the kind that screams or demands applause, not the kind that always looks like victory. It's the kind that wakes up every day in a body that's changed, in a world that isn't always kind, and chooses to stand anyway. That's what I've come to understand. That's what Karen never did. When the board adopted the new disability inclusion policy, I thought maybe, just maybe, there'd be a shift in the way people treated one another. Maybe the air would be lighter, the community less divided. Maybe Karen would back down and disappear into her manicured lawn and her wine glass full of denial. But instead, the aftermath revealed something unexpected. Karen didn't hold the power she thought she did. She never had. She just spoke the loudest, while everyone else stayed quiet. Now, they weren't quiet anymore. The very next week, our neighborhood group chat lit up with stories. A veteran shared how the HOA once told him to keep his wheelchair ramp temporary because it was too permanent looking. A mother confessed that her autistic son was asked not to attend neighborhood parties because he had outbursts. We weren't just talking about one woman's cruelty anymore. We were uncovering a culture that punished difference, that silenced discomfort, that for years used community standards as a weapon to exclude anyone who didn't fit a mold. But something had changed. Now people were listening, and more than that, they were speaking. I'll never forget the day the new HOA president, a soft-spoken man named Marcus, knocked on my door. He'd been a board member for years, but until recently, I hadn't heard him speak more than a sentence at a time. He brought flowers, not the kind meant to impress, but the kind meant to say, "I'm sorry this took so long." He handed me a folder. Inside were new HOA policies drafted with the help of a disability rights consultant. There were detailed procedures for accessible event planning, inclusive language training, and rules about reasonable accommodations that would be distributed to every single resident. And then, he did something I'll never forget. He looked at Lily, sitting on the couch behind me with her art pad, and asked gently, "Would you like to help us design the new community welcome signs?" She blinked. "Me?" "Yes," he said, smiling. "We want people to know this is a neighborhood for everyone. Your art says that better than any policy ever could." Lily lit up. It was a small moment, but to her, it was everything. That night, as I tucked her in, she whispered, "Do you think people will stop being scared of different now?" I didn't lie. I said, "Some will, some won't, but we made them see us. That's a start." And then, for the first time in months, she slept through the night without waking up from a bad dream. As for Karen, she didn't show up to the next 3 HOA meetings. Then, one morning, a moving truck appeared in front of her house. Word spread quickly. Some said she was voluntarily relocating. Others said her husband had finally convinced her to leave before things got worse. All I knew was that she didn't wave goodbye. She didn't have to. Her house sold quietly. A new family moved in. A single mom with a daughter in a wheelchair. When I met her, she looked nervous. "We've had some bad experiences with HOAs before," she admitted. I smiled. "You're safe here now. We made sure of it." And I meant it, because strength isn't just surviving cruelty. It's making sure no one else has to. It's strange, isn't it? How something as small as a prosthetic leg, a piece of titanium, and plastic could spark a movement. But that's how real change begins. Not in boardrooms or speeches, but in living rooms, in backyards, in quiet acts of resistance. I walk slower now than I used to. I limp on rainy days. Some mornings, I wince, getting out of bed, but I don't hide my leg anymore. I don't cover it up when I go to the pool. I don't worry about the stairs, and when I see a kid looking at it with wide eyes, I don't shush them. I kneel down and tell them it's my superhero upgrade, because it is. It's proof that I'm still here, still fighting, still whole, maybe even more whole than before. And to anyone out there listening, maybe someone like me, someone who's been called a hazard, a nuisance, a problem just for existing, I want you to know something. You are not the issue. You are not too much. You are not inconvenient. You are not a violation of someone else's comfort. You are human, and that's more than enough. So the next time someone like Karen tries to shrink you, tries to shame you, tries to erase your place in the world, stand taller, speak louder, fight harder. Because real strength, it's not about power, it's about presence, and we're not going anywhere.